As if there was ever a doubt. Hello everybody, my name is Ash, and I am from Well Played, and I've played the Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine 2 preview build. Now, the reason that I'm standing up and not sitting at my computer is because the experience that I've had this last 7 days is one of those things that has me really sort of amped up and giddy, and sitting down and talking to you from a script just feels like it betrays the whole thing. Just don't judge my filming setup. Don't tell people I live like this. Now, for people out of the loop, Space Marine 2 is surprisingly a sequel to the original Space Marine game that came out during the Xbox 360 and PS3 era of gaming. Now, admittedly, Warhammer back then wasn't really as big of a property as it is now. It's always been popular, but the thing is, it's always been aggressively niche. I mean, it is a hobby where you collect plastic little men, paint them up, and then do battle over a tabletop. Now, the original Space Marine did actually manage to capture that incredibly specific fantasy of playing, like an 8-foot-tall armored man-mounted. It came from a company that has long since changed its ways, from a publisher that has literally died and come back, so the idea of getting a sequel was kind of not really on the cards. But then, obviously, the announcement came, and so too did the doubt. A lot has changed since Space Marine 1 came out, and the thought of a sequel actually managing to nail what a Space Marine 2 sequel should be filled me with doubt. Times have changed, Warhammer has changed, Space Marines have changed. But without sounding like a magnificent Games Workshop shill, let me tell you, it really is every bit as good as it looks. Now, the preview build came with basically a little smattering of the stuff that you'd expect from the full game when it releases later in September. It had a full narrative campaign chapter to play through, and it came with 2 of the cooperative operations missions, which are sort of like the little side things you can do with your friends, but more on those later. The campaign portion took place somewhere about the midpoint of the game, I think was described to me, and it follows Titus and his 2 squad mates as they are working to send a message, obviously asking for help or just generally to warn someone. We don't really get to the full skinny of that. During the campaign mission, you are tasked with trying to get to an astropath, who are psychic message senders of the 41st millennium. During the mission, you hear about how you do have another squad out there who is desperately trying to fell a hive tyrant. For me, personally, I felt that I was a bit let down by the fact that there was obviously a much cooler mission happening, and I wasn't doing that one. I came to realize that there's actually quite a lot going on from a narrative standpoint. The really cool thing about Space Marine 2 and how it's telling its story is that it doesn't get bogged down in exposition, and it doesn't do like really big sort of lore dumps at you. The really intimate story being told about Titus is trying to explain sort of what happened between the first game and this one, with little snippets trying to explain sort of what happened during his absence and why has he returned now, and more importantly, why did he get demoted? Space Marines are genetic super soldiers, effectively the perfect soldier. They don't really do things wrong, they don't really get demoted, they sort of do their job or die. Titus got taken away by the secret space police and he's come back, kinda means that all of his battle brothers who used to be his mates are now a little bit suspicious. So during your boots on the ground frenetic fighting, you'll have these small narrative moments that happen sort of with chatter between you and your colleagues, and most importantly, these really small cinematic sequences that serve as sort of a bridging tool between different parts of the mission. Now, the actual mission structure feels a little bit like playing through a Left 4 Dead campaign. You're sort of moving through these linear spaces trying to get to the next objective and complete it. But the world design within the game doesn't make it feel like you're being railroaded. So it means that the world has been very carefully designed to still feel like a real place, but still ferry you where you need to go. That doesn't mean that exploring's off the table. You can sort of have a look around. You'll find things and audio logs and stuff, but it's definitely not open world. But it's still generous linear spaces, which are very cool. The forces you encounter during your time are the Tyranids. They're the bug creatures of the 41st millennium. They're scary, they're teethy, they're clawy. On the 40k level of storytelling, they are terrifying. In-game, this means that you're going to encounter all kinds of different levels of gnashy beasts. And the action in Space Marine 2 is epic, like ridiculous. Space Marine 1 captured the feeling of being, an 8-foot-tall armored killing machine quite well. It rewarded you for doing like these massive glory kills by giving you back your health, and your armor was literally called contempt because you hated your enemies. This is sort of returned in Space Marine 2, albeit there's been a lot of things happening in the gaming space since then, so a lot of the systems lean more towards what people are familiar with now. The main one of these being an actual realized parry system. Depending on the weapon you're using, there are button combinations you can use to do particular combos. You could do a couple of light attacks and then a massive hard-hitting smash attack to scatter all the lesser foes. You can then make use of the parry system to add a little bit of finesse to what you're doing. And this is pretty straightforward. In the game, it's reflected as a round chevron of different colours that try to indicate what's coming your way. When you stare down a Carnifex, which is quite literally the embodiment of murder, you push your button at just the right time, flick away the thing that was about to hit you, and then pop it in the jaw. And that's just the melee. Of course, it's a third-person action game, and one of the biggest things about Warhammer 40,000 is its range of guns. Playing the preview, I think almost every gun is here. At first, I was worried about the number of bolters in the game, thinking that, like, how many times can you do a self-propelled, machine gun before it gets boring? But the truth is, they're actually kind of awesome. They're all very different. I found myself really enjoying the bolt carbine just because it has a massively high rate of fire, so you really shred stuff in that medium range. Heavy weapons, I love the plasma incinerator because it lobs a massive ball of superheated plasma like a grenade. So it means that your moment-to-moment gameplay mostly involves entering a space and thinking about what you want to do next. And all of this takes place in an environment that is stunning to behold. The fidelity on display is ridiculous, with every sort of area you can imagine is just packed with detail, and so much of it is just unmistakably that Warhammer 40,000 aesthetic. There's a very careful level of measurement done to make sure that the environments that you inhabit, when they are swarming with enemies, when they have 3 massive space marines going to town, when there's lesser human allies just trying to help, you still know what's going on. The whole thing just comes together and paints a beautiful, brutal picture of what warfare looks like in the 41st millennium. Now, the other side of Space Marine 2, when you're not doing the campaign, is a secondary set of missions that are available as part of the operations mode. From what was described in game, serve as campaign chapters that have sort of been chopped out of the campaign and balanced around the idea of being able to play one of 6 classes in a group of 3 to complete those objectives together with friends. Now, just note, the entire campaign can be played in 3-player co-op. In the operations mode, they sort of blow the hinges off the expected playstyle and instead go, nah, do this your way with your mates, with your playstyle. And this is cool because there's 6 classes, but you can only ever have 3 people in a game. So it means that it's going to come down to the dynamic of how you want to play, how your friends want to play, and what the mission is asking for. But it doesn't end there. There's a progression system within the game. As you play these missions and earn experience and level up the classes, you get access to talent trees to change the playstyle of that particular class in a way that suits how you want to play it. Now, my cold, dead, cynical heart expected that Space Marine 2 would have to have some kind of massive downside. It'd have to have some kind of Faustian bargain made. To make the game as good as it is, it had to lose something. I assume the game would have either very little customization, or that any customization that it did have would be mired in microtransaction hell. From what I can tell from the preview build, the game will ship with a proper customization option where you can choose colors, logos, you can choose where the colors go, whether it's the main part of the armor or the trim, whether it's the internal of a pauldron or the external of a pauldron, the left leg or the right leg. You can then get actual geometric changes to your armor. Do you want to have a skull on your knee pad? Do you want to have a helmet on your head? Do you want a bionic robot hand? And these are all tied to doing the actual operations missions and earning funny money and progression that allows you to unlock and buy them. As far as negatives go, there's not really a lot to say. I mean, it's a preview, so I haven't seen the full game, so I can't speak to the entire thing, but I do know that the build I was on did have a couple of weird quirks. When playing alone, the only things that I noticed weren't things that actually impacted gameplay, which was great. Sometimes when entering an execution animation, the camera would for some reason zoom really far away from the action and then dramatically zoom back into me. I don't think that's intended because it only happened 3 times compared to all the other times where it didn't happen. And sometimes randomly, when an enemy would enter sort of that execute me now state, they'd freeze for a second and then animate into the, oh god, I'm stunned. It looked a bit like they were thinking about whether or not they wanted to be murdered, but whatever. The other disappointing facet of my time was just simply that these operations missions, at least in the build that we were playing, would basically never launch. In the end, I managed to get both the operations done, I managed to get through a single operation with a friend, and I probably spent about 2 hours trying to launch them and achieving nothing. At one point, I spent basically an hour and a half trying to launch a game so I could play co-op with Skill Up, him. And as nice as it was to hang out in the battle bars and shoot the shit, we probably would have preferred to be stomping bugs. So yeah, we kind of hope that that's fixed before the game goes live, because that's going to be really awkward. As a closing statement, my cold, cynical heart expected that this game couldn't possibly amount to the expectations, or at least the legacy that was left by the original Space Marine game. And Saber have managed to nail every single one of those criteria that would make this game not only exceptional just for people who enjoy a great action experience, but also serve as one of the greatest realizations of the Warhammer 40,000 landscape ever seen. So if you have even a passing interest in what this game could offer, just know that I think it's going to turn out excellent. I think the developers have done everything in their power to make sure that this is a game that is fun to play again and again. And most importantly, they've taken steps to make sure it's fun to play again and again with your friends. Because realistically, the only thing more fun than playing a living, walking man-mountain of a tank is to be playing a game where you play as a living, walking man-mountain of a tank with your 2 living, walking man-mountain tank friends. And with that, thanks for joining me, and I'll see you in the next one.